On today's show, the Cavs have two open roster spots left. Kelly Oubre and P.J. Washington are still in the free agency market and are names that have come up. Could they or should they be players Cleveland is considering? Let's find out.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
What's up, everyone? Evan Dammarell here, flying solo this week, even though I'm one of two voices behind Locked On Cavs. My co-host Chris Manning is out of the office. So today we'll be tackling all things Cleveland Cavaliers and talking about, over the next two episodes, some of the players they could look at with their open roster spots. But I'm a credentialed member of covering the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Cleveland sports scene at large for Down Euclid. We're growing quite a bit. We're a non-profit news organization. Check us out however you can. As always, this episode was produced by Jake Stevens, and our intro music was brought to you by our friends at Astral Radio. And before I get started talking about today's first player that the Cavs could look at, thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we're on YouTube if you're watching me right now. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which, as always, features your team, like the Cleveland Cavaliers, every single day. On paper, Kelly Oubre physically measures out as a player the Cavs need more of. He's a lanky swingman who can slide in as either the starting small forward or be a key scoring threat off the bench for the Cavs. Last year for the Hornets, Oubre averaged 20.3 points, 5.2 rebounds, and 1.1 assists in about 32.3 minutes per game, and he played 48 games for Charlotte last season. Again, on paper, those numbers look amazing. But when given context, the argument for Oubre starts to fall apart, not just for the Cavs, but really any team. For his career, Oubre is a fairly average three-point shooter, but considering he connected on 31.9% of his 7.1 attempts per game last year with the Hornets, he was firing away as a lead scoring threat on the worst team in the NBA. They especially became that when LaMelo Ball was sidelined, so not great, Bob. Those suboptimal numbers may give you pause, considering the Cavs have already have a lackluster perimeter option at small forward in Isaac Okoro. But to Oube's credit, he at least isn't gun shy like Okoro can be on the perimeter, like we saw in the playoffs against the New York Knicks. And if the Cavs were to add Oubre into the fold, he could be a player that the Cavs really could use in their offensive arsenal and just overall depth and look. His best three-point shooting percentage here came when Oubre was with the Phoenix Suns, where he connected on 35.2% of his 5.5 attempts per game. Again, it isn't like Oubre's Steph Curry or something out there, but he's more of a perimeter threat than Okoro is currently, and I think that's definitely worth noting just when looking at the grand scope of what the Cavs could be if they try to go after Kelly Oubre. But speaking of Okoro, I talked about this at length last time I went solo, on how Okoro can carve out minutes pretty easily in JB Bickerstaff's rotation due to being Cleveland's best point of attack defender. In this hypothetical scenario, if the Cavs were to add Kelly Oubre, Okoro would be using that defensive upside to battle Oubre and his offensive upside for minutes, and for now, I think just because of how JB Bickerstaff operates as a coach, you'd have to give a leg up to Isaac Okoro just because of that defensive acumen. Again, he's their best point of attack defender, and more than that, like JB Bickerstaff is a defense-first coach and a creature of habit. He would rather roll and rock with the guy that maybe he has a better familiarity with versus an unknown commodity that isn't the best defender at times like Oubre. And I'm not here just to trash on Oubre's defense. I just don't think he's good as Okoro because Oubre is a pretty competent defender when he tries. He does have elite physical attributes, and he was known, again, like during that high year at the Suns, as a pretty consistent and strong defender on the perimeter. He wasn't a point of attack defender, but he could be a help guy, he could be a switch guy, he could be somebody who could at least handle the assignment and possibly slow down the opposition in front of him. And that defensive ability since that time in Phoenix has waned, and that kind of makes me cool on the prospect of him, but perhaps JB Bickerstaff could tap into what worked in Phoenix and see if he's able to kind of squeeze some blood from the stone like he did with Donovan Mitchell when Mitchell went from having to carry the entire offensive responsibility with the Jazz to have being allowed to shoulder the load with Darius Garland and others, and maybe allow him to tap into his long wingspan and just kind of what he was expected to be defensively. Kind of a similar vein to Oubre, where the fact that Oubre could tap into that potential defensively, or like maybe just show signs of the player he once was, because he's not gunning away from 3-point range. But considering all the good things Oubre brings to the table, and we're laying it out, there's some good that comes with the bad, but there's more good than there is with bad. You're probably wondering out loud, as you either listening to this on your drive to work, taking kids to whatever's going on in summer before school starts, or just whatever you're doing right now. You're probably wondering why Kelly Oubre isn't signed right now. Well, it's a combination of him probably wanting more money than what any team has left to spend, maybe other than the Chicago Bulls, with the injury exception they have of Lonzo Ball. And the fact that he only played 48 minutes last year due to injury, and in those 48 minutes, how hyperinflated his stats were because the Hornets were so bad and they needed somebody to take those shots. So if I was running an NBA team, just like taking into consideration why he's still on the market and the pretty valid reasons, it would make me uneasy just signing him to like a long-term deal. And it's probably why he's not going to get a long-term contract, or a team that has anything left that's like sizable with a mid-level exception is going to sign him to. In all likelihood, Oubre needs to prove that he's healthy and show that maybe he's able to contribute to a winning team like Cleveland or many other teams, whether it's like Phoenix or Golden State or the Lakers or the Bucks or the Knicks as well. And he probably will sign a 1-year vet min deal. And then if that were the case, I think that if you're the Cavs, you would definitely consider that, just considering how bona fide of a scoring talent he is. But the issue is there are guys that you have established with probably a clear message and at least clear vision of playing ahead of Oubre with Max Strus, George Niang. There's Isaac Okoro as well on the perimeter. There's Karis LeVert who re-signed. Like, there's guys that would be ahead of Oubre in the rotation, and there's not much of a clean path for him to get consistent minutes in a winning situation, so he could cash in on that next summer, especially if he can stay healthy. And maybe that's why Oubre doesn't really like entertain the notion of signing with the Cavs as much, unless like there's just no other offer that materializes. So, as a little bit of a caveat here, this could definitely change if the Cavs do consider signing Oubre's former, or maybe soon to be former teammate in Charlotte, P.J. Washington. I'll explain how this is going to happen because it's a little complicated. But first, I want to give you a word from today's loan sponsor, FanDuel. As I mentioned before, today's episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run in any game. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no other better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball and the official betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. What is up, everyone? Evan Dammarell here again, about to talk to you and hit you up on P.J. Washington. But thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Everydayers, I will be back on Wednesday talking about Christian Wood, his hypothetical fit with the team, and some other remaining free agency options in a lightning round. The Jazz hands emphasizes lightning. So, at the core of this all, P.J. Washington is a poster child for why players and likely their agents hate the concept of restricted free agency, which is something that helps teams like the Hornets or even the Cavs keeping talent that you've drafted and developed within your market because you have the luxury of matching contract offers, or just kind of figuring out just like how much money they're worth financially on the open market if you don't feel comfortable signing them. Because when you look at P.J. Washington, he's everything a team wants. He's a stretch four, and he's a plus defender in the paint. He's long and athletic, and is a career 36.6% three-point shooter. And he should be making at least what Isaiah Stewart just got from the Detroit Pistons, which is a 4-year, $64 million contract. And according to Jake Fisher, the Hornets and Washington reportedly are far apart on a new deal. And Washington and his agent need a team to step up to do them a favor with a larger offer than the Hornets will likely either just match, just like how DeAndre Ayton got his 4-year max offer from the Suns, and after the Pacers stepped up to sign him in restricted free agency. The problem is for Washington, in an already compressed free agency, there isn't any team that can realistically offer him the money that he's looking for right now, and I don't think he's going to sign for the remaining scraps of a mid-level exception, because that's likely lower than what the Hornets are offering Washington. It's less than what he deserves. I'd mentioned he deserves Isaiah Stewart money, and anything to be quickly matched for the Hornets, which is why no other team that's giving up an offer that's worthwhile, because why would they go through the song and dance of trying to get a guy when Charlotte's just going to swoop in and match a pretty low ball offer and then just keep Washington on a cheaper deal, and it's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And that's why he appears to have 3 options right now. He could take the Hornets offer, the least likely of the choices presented to him. He could sign the qualifying offer for $8.5 million next season, which would be a huge flight risk for the Hornets because then he's an unrestricted free agent next summer, or find a sign and trade offer that lands him with a new team and a contract he likes, and the Hornets get something in return. Something pretty similar to what the Cavs did with Max Strus and the Miami Heat, where they parlayed that into a 3-team deal where Jetty Osman and Lamar Stevens went to San Antonio, with I believe Stevens getting waived by the Spurs after that. And then the Heat didn't take on any salary, so they could keep themselves flexible for whenever Damian Lillard decides to, or rather, the Blazers rather decide to talk shop on trading Damian Lillard there. So it's been reported that I can confirm that a sign and trade remains the most likely outcome for Washington, and I can also confirm that the Cavs are exploring that avenue to add Washington to their roster. Because the fit is really ideal when you look at what Washington can be. It's going to cost the Cavs a lot, though, because if they want to pay him what he's worth, which again is Isaiah Stewart money, is like, one, are the Cavs comfortable paying him that? Like, they want to sign him to a 4-year, $64 million contract or some variation of that where the base rate is $16 million a year. And that's where things get a little muddy, and maybe where the Hornets might become a little leery negotiations. But here's, hypothetically speaking, what the Cavs would have to give up to acquire P.J. Washington in a sign and trade. It would be a combination of Ricky Rubio or Dean Wade, along with Isaac Okoro and Sam Merrill, with Sam Merrill's contract not being guaranteed. The Hornets could waive him, but in all likelihood, it's going to be like the Cavs have to send out 3 players to acquire 1 in Washington, and that would be maybe a tough pill to swallow, even though you just added maybe 3 rotation guys in George Niang, Max Strus, and Ty Jerome as well. But if you're willing to make that sacrifice, maybe if you're able to make more moves on the margins after you acquire Washington, because let's be frank, like out of the players being mentioned in that trade, like Okoro is a fringe rotation guy, and so is Rubio. So maybe that's a sacrifice you're worth making or consider making, because when you look at what Washington can be, he can be that ideal backup 4, maybe sometimes a small ball 5 that can play really nicely alongside Evan Mobley or Jared Allen. Or maybe you slide him down and play super tall ball and you play him at the 3, kind of like similar to what the Hornets did, or just what a lot of teams did with Marvin Williams towards the end of his career. And he can kind of have that fluidity in the rotation because he provides you that spacing, he provides you that interior defense. He has some at least basic understanding of switchability on defense as well. Like, there's a lot of good things to like about it. And more than anything, we could talk about this more on Friday's show because it was a question for the mailbag, but if in the event Jared Allen is traded and the Cavs view Evan Mobley as like their permanent center going forward, you could slide Washington in as the starting power forward for the Cavs when you cross that bridge or have that awkward and uncomfortable conversation about trading Jared Allen. But it's fair to ask yourself, is acquiring PJ Washington worth it for the Cavs? Who knows? Like I said, you're giving up 3 players. 2 are guys that are likely not in the rotation in Dean Wade and Sam Merrill, or you're giving up like Isaac Okoro, Sam Merrill, and Ricky Rubio, with 2 of those guys being in the rotation. Ideally, for Cleveland, you want to try and keep Isaac Okoro just because he is your best point of attack defender. But if the Hornets want to facilitate a sign and trade, and maybe they're going to kind of play hardball, they could easily match that contract offer the Cavs give him, and Washington gets what he wants, and the Cavs then have to go back to the drawing board. But that's just the nature of restricted free agency, and I think that's just part of the trickiness too, because you kind of have to force these situations where Max Strus was an unrestricted free agent, but like it was pretty clear in the ether that he was going to sign with the Cavaliers early on. But It's going to take some maneuvering from the Cavs, and if they're able to acquire PJ Washington, that could be pretty good. And that's where Kelly Oubre kind of comes back into the conversation too. If they do acquire PJ Washington, it's a possibility they could pursue when it comes to Washington. But we'll talk about who would I rather have, what do I think the Cavs should do between these two Hornets players in the upcoming segment. I'm going to take a quick break, get a drink of water, and be right back with more Locked On Cavs. How's it going, guys? I am back. I am hydrated, and I am ready to talk more about PJ Washington, Kelly Oubre, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, in terms of who you would rather have, I would say if you were unable to get PJ Washington, I would probably not consider Kelly Oubre as closely just because Oubre doesn't seem as clean of a fit. He's going to want to maximize those opportunities. It's clear like those numbers are pretty inflated just from his time last year with Charlotte. But there is evidence of him playing on winning situations, whether that was with, I mean, I know they're middling, but like the Washington Wizards were perfectly average, especially when Oubre was on the roster. He did play with the Golden State Warriors for a hot second until he became a trade chip for them. His time at Phoenix was super encouraging, even though the Suns were still kind of in a rut there too. But like he was part of like that culture revitalization the Suns had after just being mired in mediocrity post Steve Nash for such a long time. But it's fair to question just Oubre by himself. Like, is he going to be willing to fit into a situation? I think he would be, but he also is going to be looking at his financial security and what he can secure going forward. And if he's not getting those opportunities with Cleveland, I just don't think the conversation happens. But let's say the Cavs, hypothetically speaking, do acquire PJ Washington, and it does cost them Okoro and Rubio, and we'll say Sam Merrill as well. Dean Wade's still here, but he can maybe crack the rotation at that point too. So let's say you get PJ Washington. Your rotation heading into next season is Garland, Mitchell, I'd say Struth still for now, Mobley, and Allen. Again, you gave up Okoro and Rubio in this deal, but off the bench then you'd have Levert, Niang. With Rubio gone, you slide and bump Ty Jerome up into the back end of the rotation. And then maybe PJ Washington even supersedes Ty Jerome in the rotation. He becomes your eighth man. Maybe he supersedes George Niang as well and becomes your seventh man. But like he bumps himself up into the rotation. You add Ty Jerome into the mix there as well, along with Niang. But like if you have that open roster spots and like you are now, well, if you gave up 3 for 1, you'd be to a 12-player team. You need 13 players minimum. If Kelly Oubre is comfortable playing with you on the vet min and maximizes opportunities, I think there's a cleaner path for him to playing just because I think Washington would bump Niang a little bit more into the rotation. I think then you'd see more Karis LeVert and Max Strus minutes, obviously, but like with Okoro gone, with Rubio gone, maybe Ty Jerome isn't the guy I believe he's going to be. There's more of a cleaner path for Kelly Oubre to get minutes as whether it's like the starting small forward spot or it is more so he is the just kind of one of those key gunners off the bench for the Cavs and just gives them length, versatility, and just a lot of fun and creative plug-and-play options in their lineups, whether it's with Karis LeVert or Donovan Mitchell or PJ Washington and Evan Mobley. Like there's a lot of versatility and creativity JB Bickerstaff and the Cavs can utilize. So I think I'd warm up more to the idea of getting Oubre if you get Washington first, just because Oubre is one of the best free agents still available in terms of just like perimeter players. And if you're giving up a wing player in Isaac Okoro to acquire PJ Washington, you want to try and supplant that loss by bringing in another wing player. The best player available, other than Terrence Davis, who we'll talk about more on Wednesday's show, is Kelly Oubre. But it's complicated. Sign and trades rarely work out the way you hope them to. There's a very, very realistic chance that Washington just goes back on his qualifying offer with the Hornets and then plays out the remainder of his contract and becomes a UFA, or maybe then signs an extension with the Hornets before that can happen just because the Hornets feel more comfortable paying him. But it's odd that he's still available on the market. I think it would be remiss of the Cavs or any team not to consider PJ Washington. I think ditto for Kelly Oubre. I think he is a viable player for some teams, but there was a bit of a spending spree, to open free agency, and things have cooled off considerably since then. So you're going to see a lot of guys swallowing bitter pills, and I think Kelly Oubre is going to be one of them. And I think PJ Washington ultimately ends up with the Cavs. Or not the Cavs, oh my gosh, the Hornets. But Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think or would rather see the Cavs do, whether that's Oubre, Washington, maybe even Christian Wood, who, again, we'll be talking about on Wednesday's show. But that's going to do it for me today for Monday's episode of Locked On Cavs. I want to thank you all again making the Locked On Cavs your first listen each and every day. As I have said several times now, I will be back on Wednesday as we're scaling back to 3 episodes a week for a couple weeks to talk about some more free agency options, including Christian Wood, Terrence Davis, and I think like a list of 10 players. Best of luck to editor Jake Stevens keeping up with me, just starting to firing through all those names. But until then, guys, I'm Evan. This is Locked On Cavs. See you Wednesday.